Cool. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to the webinar. The goal here is to introduce you to a couple McKinsey consultants, and specifically consultants who came through the undergrad recruitment pipeline. These are veterans who served enlisted, used service of school to get to college, and then were able to successfully recruit for roles as business analysts at McKinsey. Coming out of undergrad. Now, in my case, I worked at McKinsey, but I was an MBA hire, and the bulk of veterans that are at the firm right now come through that process. But it's very different than the hiring process for undergrad consultants. So, the goal here is to share some of the recruiting best practices and let you all get a little bit better understanding of what consultants actually do. So I'll just give you all a quick intro, and then I'll pass it over to the panelists. So name's Alec Emmert. I'm the CEO of Service to School. I served on active duty in the Navy for 8 years. I was a submariner and got my MBA at Wharton, and I went to work in McKinsey's Philadelphia office. I focused on private equity and advanced industries. The best way to think about it, it's almost like anything that's built in a factory. So I did everything from jet engines to construction equipment with a focus on private equity. And so did that for a little over 2.5 years. And the opportunity to come and be service school CEO came up, and jumped on that. It was too good to pass up, but I had a pretty good experience at McKinsey, and I'm always glad to share information about not only McKinsey, but the consulting career path for veterans, because I think that, post, whether you're going out of the military, whether you're going to undergrad or getting an MBA, consulting is like one of the best industries to get into, to teach you about business and give you kind of a universal skill set you can apply and get caught up with your peers who didn't serve. So without further ado, I will turn you over to Eric Thompson.
Hey everybody, yep, Eric Thompson. Served in the Coast Guard for 9 years as a bosun's mate. After I got out, finished up my undergraduate degree at Harvard, and then recruited for McKinsey and joined this past March. So I've been here for about 9 months out of the Detroit office. And currently, I'm not aligned with any industry, doing what McKinsey likes to call a random walk. So you have the opportunity to come in and get to experience a lot of different industries. So I've spent a little bit of time in automotive, spent some time doing construction projects, and yeah, it's been a good 9 months. So looking forward to talking about it.
Cool. All right, over to you, Kevin.
Excellent. Great to meet all of you. My name is Kevin Peterson. I'm a senior BA at McKinsey. So been here about going on 2.5 years. Before that, I went to Columbia University for undergraduate and did 4 years there studying economics and history. And like many of you before that, I was in the Army, enlisted. I was an infantryman and corporal in 82nd Airborne, did about 3.5 years there. So kind of a traditional service to school pathway, but as we all know, it's non-traditional. And actually volunteer service to school as ambassador for a few years. So always great to be here and to meet all of you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm just kicking things off. The first question I have for you is, coming out of the military and going into undergrad, did you have any idea of what consulting was and how to recruit for it? And kind of walk us through the process you took to learn about the industry and then get hired by McKinsey. And I'll tell you what, we'll switch things up, and Kevin will go first to you, then we'll pass it over to Eric.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, right, to be upfront, no. And I don't think many people know what consulting is, especially from the veteran community, right? Because not many of us had the same kind of, grew up in the same environment, understanding where like our parents were consultants, for example. So I had no idea. When I went to Columbia, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I probably thought I was going to go back into kind of public sector type work. But then I think my sophomore year, you hear a lot about consulting. You hear a lot about IB consulting as these kind of professional services opportunities. So I applied, and a little bit about my story is I actually applied 3 times to McKinsey and also applied to all the other consulting firms, right? So I interviewed with McKinsey, BCG, and Bain for internships each of my, I think my sophomore and my junior years, and didn't pass. It's a very competitive process. But kind of each time I went through that, I understood a little bit more of what it meant and what it kind of looked like. But what really solidified for me what consulting was and made me very excited to, go back and keep trying is I got a consulting internship at a small communications firm, like a communications consulting firm in Washington, D.C. They did public relations, kind of reputation management type consulting. And what that did is I had a writing background. I wrote for the Columbia Spectator. I was very interested in research. I had this kind of skill that I was able to use in a consulting context that gave me a lot of experience working with different clients, managing different work streams, kind of applying that kind of outside third-party experience onto something else. And that made me realize what consulting really was. So when I went to apply and interview my third time at McKinsey in my senior year, I had a much stronger understanding of what I was doing, much more understanding like what consulting was. I think that really helped me out and, got me to where I am today. So it was kind of a piecemeal process for me. There's no one time where I knew what it was, nor did I really know anyone who did consulting work personally. So it took me a while to figure out, but I'm excited to help you all kind of learn that more upfront instead of going through that process like I did.
Cool, good stuff. Eric, what about yourself? What was your process like?
Yeah, pretty similar. So I did not know what consulting was when I started undergrad. It was actually the president of the Student Veteran Association talked about his internship the past summer that he did consulting. I was like, what is that? So he kind of walked me through what it was, and I applied for an internship at Strategy and my sophomore year, interned there, and then my junior year applied for an internship with like Kevin, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, all of these firms, and ended up coming to McKinsey as an intern my junior year, my junior summer, loved it, and then came back full time in March. So yeah, it just really appealed to me because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of undergrad, and so consulting gives you the opportunity to do a lot of different things. So it was cool to get into and learn what it was about.
Yeah, very cool, Eric. And so you mentioned that you got a brief from the head of the Veterans Club there at Harvard, and he talked about what it meant to be a consultant. Now it's time to return the favor. Can you tell this group what it is, what it means to be a consultant, what you really do in that field?
Yeah, it's the hardest question you get asked, I think, Thanksgiving dinner every year. What do you do for work? So the gist of it is companies will have some questions that they need answered, and they'll bring us in to help answer those questions. So it could be anything from personnel questions, private equity clients might bring you in for some due diligences. It's a wide range of topics that they want to bring you in for your expertise and your knowledge. And so you're really helping them solve their toughest problems on a day-to-day basis.
Gotcha. Cool. And Kevin, what does being a consultant mean to you? Or like how would you we're just wrapped up Thanksgiving. How have you described being a consultant to your relatives?
Yeah, so it's a similarly difficult question. I think the root of it is being a consultant at a place like McKinsey, for example, could actually mean a lot of different things, right? So the type of work I do is probably different from the type of work Eric is doing or the type of work that Alec is doing. So, or did, right? So Eric is pretty spot on how we generally describe it. It's like you're here to help give guidance or to help solve someone's problem. So let's say a company or an organization has this big burning question about their strategy or procurement or their personnel, and they're not quite sure if they can answer it in-house, then they can bring us in to help answer it. But what that question looks like is why it gets so confusing. So for example, I did one project, what we call studies, where I worked on product design for a snack company, right? And that question is one of marketing, it's one of branding. It's one of shelf space, right? I did another project that was effectively a startup for a hospital, right? So that's a competitive landscape, a market landscape, minimum viable product type question, like what can you put into this space? Now I'm working on a big strategic question for a government agency, right? So it's a question of what should we do? What are the things we can do, right? So we're always answering questions, but the questions itself is very different. So that's where some of the confusion I think comes in.
Gotcha. And so what I think is really kind of key there, and I think a lot of the audience might be asking themselves, say, well, I don't know anything about product design or anything like that. How do you get up to speed and become someone that a company would want to hire for that type of project or engagement? And yeah, and Kevin, I'll follow up with you because you're the one who brought it up. You seem like you're doing a lot of stuff with this in the product space. So, coming from the Army Infantry to Columbia undergrad, how did you become the guy to go to about product launches and modifications?
So that's kind of right. That's a challenge, but it's also kind of a fun part of the job. And I'll also say sometimes a misconception, right? Because there's, I think, a misconception sometimes that hey, Kevin Peterson, you're new, you just joined, you're expected to counsel a CEO on a big question on something, right? We're not at our level, let's say entry level positions, you're not expected to be a subject matter expert. You're expected to be smart, to be hardworking, to be able to learn, right? To capture information, to put in your time to research. But right, the expectation is you're there to to learn from the people who have been there longer with you, for example. So I've been in a small team. You're gonna have a manager. That manager's been at the firm 2, 3, 4 years. Oftentimes they have experience in that function you're working in or in that content you're working in. So they're gonna be your first point of contact for like, hey, I'm not quite sure what this means or how to do this. They're there to direct you. Oftentimes your other teammates, the other associates or BAs or SBA in my case, hey, I've already done this before for another client. Let me show you how to do it. And then the partners and the content directors, right? There's people at the firm who are spent 15 years working in procurement. You get them on the phone that day and you ask them their questions and they're obligated to help, right? So you have all this kind of expertise support. Now, at the same time, you're never going to know as much as the client. And that's part of the job. And it's in a way why they hire us, right? Because the client, they know a lot about their topic. Sometimes they're too overwhelmed with details. And having a third party come in who doesn't quite know much about the problem that you're specifically facing, but knows a lot about how that problem looked like in different industries or how other companies have thought about that problem is what they're looking for. So you don't have to know everything. I didn't know a single thing about product design. I knew economics, I knew some finance, I took those classes, but I came with a willingness to learn, a willingness to be humble and say, hey, I don't know this, partner, EM, manager, tell me this. Right, the same kind of willingness you need to have in the military to succeed. And over time, it's kind of a compound interest kind of thing. You start learning a lot very fast, and it just builds on top of each other over time. And I think we all go through that kind of learning curve at the firm.
Gotcha. And so you've been here for a little bit longer. You've kind of found your niche a little bit, and I'm interested in hearing from Eric. So you're a little newer. You've been at the firm for about 9 months. Describe how this first 9 months have been and how you're looking at the next, say, year of your career at McKinsey.
Yeah, the first 9 months have been interesting. So kind of building off what Kevin was talking about and how we solve problems. Coming in, like I had that expectation on myself that I was going to come into a situation and become that expert. I'm going to develop the answer and stuff, and quickly learned that's not how the best answers come. Your job as a business analyst is to really use all the resources at your disposal and bring the experts from the firm and the knowledge we've developed over how many years we've been doing this type of work, and bring that answer for the client. So that's been part of my development over the last 9 months is learning how to use those resources and really become the best consultant I can for the client and for the team I'm working with. And then now moving into the next year and a half, it's really starting to develop the lens of becoming more in the manager realm and how I can start to transition to working with more junior employees that are going to be coming in next year and teaching them these types of things, as well as starting to get a bigger view of outside of my individual work stream and what I'm working on, what are the other people on my team working on, and how can I help them out? So it's really starting to get more of a holistic view of the project.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Yeah. And then just for the audience, typically the way consulting works, especially at a firm like McKinsey, where you're in many cases you're hired as a generalist, to Kevin's point, just a kind of a brain, a smart person. And you spend that first year or so really working in a bunch of industries, getting when they say, like, they call it your toolkit, your skill, basically kind of skill set down, which is kind of PowerPoint and Excel. Wish it could be cooler than that, but it is what it is. But getting good at those kind of key competencies, because you use Excel to do that analysis, and you use PowerPoint to present the analysis you did in Excel, because it's in many cases things are fairly heavily quantitatively focused, so you need Excel. But with that, you see both of them reference kind of becoming a manager, and that's at that point it takes about as Eric said, about 2 to 3 years till you reach that manager level. And once you reach that manager level, you've really picked an industry you want to do. You've got some deep experience there. You've worked with a bunch of clients, and then you're kind of you're really, for all intents and purposes, in that industry for a longer period of time. That's what you're working on at the firm. And so I do want to take a step back and talk about the recruiting pipeline, both for transfers and for first year applicants. Because looking at I'm not sure where the crowd is in this journey, but we'll go to Kevin. And can you share, where you came in at? Were you a transfer or a first year student, and then how the recruiting pipeline went with those timelines, like what month you had to apply for internships, when you were interviewing, and all that?
Certainly. So I was a first year student, didn't do any schooling before my undergrad, so went straight to Columbia, did my 4 full-time years there. So I kind of saw the whole recruiting calendar. Typically what happens is, and don't quote me on the exact dates, but sometime in the, I think, spring, every year, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, pretty much all consulting firms would put out, calls for applications for different positions. In McKinsey's case, there's a summer internship where you spend, like Eric mentioned, Eric did this 10 weeks at the firm, and then you do that. There's a sophomore program for us where you do it after your sophomore year. There's a junior year program where you do it after your junior year, and then you come back to start full time. In my case, I applied full time, so I didn't intern at all. I applied for internships, I didn't pass the interview round. And I started full time. The interviews are typically in the fall, so you apply in the spring, right? You get notified in the summer. You have summer to prepare, and you interview in the fall. Now, windows have been kind of moving up, creeping up, and earlier every year. So Eric will have more recent information. So it is something you definitely have to be more proactive on. That's something I remember I kind of struggled with in undergrad. Is not only you studying, you're doing your exams, your midterms. If you want to be competitive and land these opportunities, not just McKinsey, but a lot of competitive internships, that's kind of your second job, and you have to think about it a little bit earlier than later to make sure it's a year ahead of time sometimes. But I applied, my full time. I interviewed, got the offer. Still had about a year of school left, so finished that, took the summer off, and then came and started full time as a business analyst the following year. Yeah.
Good stuff. And then Eric, just since you've got a little bit more recent data, were you, I believe you said you were a transfer student?
Yep, transferred in.
Yeah, and how did that work? How did the process work as a transfer?
It was similar. So when I transferred in as a second semester sophomore. So I was kind of off cycle, and I had a decision to make. I could either do an advanced trajectory at the school and take an extra class each semester and graduate in 2 years, or I could just do the normal 4 classes a semester and graduate in 2.5. Based on some advice for competitiveness in recruiting, I decided to take the slower path and do a sophomore year internship, and then come back with a year and a half of GPA to apply for a full internship. When I applied for the internship, they were doing applications were due at the end of July, and then interviews were taking place in August, early August, and then late August for your final round. And so you had your offer by the time you came back to school, which was great in the sense that like you had the summer to study and you didn't have to do so much overlap with schoolwork and everything, but you also have to use your summer to study. So there's upsides and downsides to it.
Gotcha. And then talk about a little bit about the outreach that happens, because you talk about applying and all this kind of stuff, interviewing. What's step one? You get to campus, you're like, I want to go work for a consulting firm. How do you get the ball rolling? And I'll give back to you.
Yep. So there's a couple things you can do. On the campus, most campuses now have veteran groups, and a lot of the veterans are heavily involved in consulting. So it's a great resource. Another one is just the company's website, whatever firm you're looking at applying to. On McKinsey's website, you can search when their applications are open, and a lot of schools will also have a dedicated recruiter, so you can look online for who that recruiter is, and you can get in contact with them. And then a third option is a lot of schools have consulting clubs. So you can get involved with those, and they'll usually be up to date on when the applications are open, when the deadlines will be.
Gotcha. And so you have to hit the ground running though, typically, right? Like as soon as you get to campus, there's from the timelines you were talking about, it being in like, interviews happening kind of in the summertime, like you've really got to have you've really got to hit the ball or hit the ground.
Yeah, especially if you're a transfer student. Say that you're entering a school as a junior, the applications for the following summer, so your junior year summer, will be most likely due before you step on campus. So once you find out what school you're going to be going to, I would definitely recommend getting in touch with either the school's career services office to figure out when those deadlines will be, or just looking on the company website. So definitely want to be proactive with that. If you are transferring in, it's definitely important to hit the ground running.
Gotcha. And I'll kick it over to, so Kevin, you've talked a lot about how many times you went through the interview process, and consulting interviews are fairly rigorous. That's not for the audience. Consulting interviews aren't what the types of interviews we're used for about where I think a lot of us who have interviewed have gotten interviews that are more behavioral, like, tell us about a time where you succeeded, tell us about a time where you failed and what you've learned from it, that kind of stuff. Now, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the case interview and how you prepared for it, Kevin.
Oh, for sure. So McKinsey does, and most consulting firms do, a type of interview called a case study or case interview, where effectively the interviewer will give you a problem, like a problem statement, and what they expect you to do is to break down the problem into like different parts, answer the parts, communicate your thoughts, right? It's a problem solving test. So exactly like Alex said, if you're thinking like an interview is, what are your strengths and weaknesses type of thing, that's kind of a part of some interviews, but usually a small part. The bigger part is, can you solve this problem? Which, I'll make it a little bit concrete. So it's we can speak the same language. A common, you could sit down and the interviewer can ask you a question like, this TV business is, losing profit, right? Why could they be losing profit? Very basic question. And the expectation is the interviewee, right, the person being interviewed, should have a basic understanding of, let's say, problem solving as a skill, right? Which means breaking down the problem into solvable parts. And I think, to be upfront, some economics, some business knowledge, right? You don't have to be a finance major. You don't have to be a economics major. But when I say, why is this TV business losing profit, you should have a basic understanding like, well, there's two potential parts to that. It's losing its revenue, or its costs are going up, right? So you have to have a sense of what that looks like. And then the rest of the interview is typically the interviewer asking you questions about why did you solve that problem that way, or giving you a harder problem to solve that kind of builds upon, right, the bigger question of like, maybe it's cost. Okay, well then let's look into the cost branch and think about, is it marginal cost, fixed cost, right? So it's just a problem solving test, usually about 45 minutes. And it's a typical format you see in consulting firms. So like the communications consulting firm I interviewed at, I did a case study. I don't know what, Eric, your experience was at Strategy and, right, but it's a good thing to get used to. I recommend going on YouTube and searching a mock case interview, especially if this is new, because it's hard to explain, but once you see it in practice, it makes sense. And yeah, Alec, I'll save maybe we talk about preparation later, but I'll just say, right, it's a part of the interview process that takes practice, and that I struggled a little bit with. It's probably the root of why I didn't pass the first times. You have to practice with other people, is probably the ideal way. So I give a case, he gives a case, and then you kind of switching places. And over time, it just it's a specific skill and way of thinking that you have to practice for the interview itself. So it requires upfront work. It's kind of annoying that you have to put in all this time just to prepare for an interview. But I promise you, even if you're not successful in, let's say your target company, that ability to do that case interview, one, makes interviews a lot easier. I think it's hard to be intimidated in terms of interviews after this experience, but also like that communications consulting firm I worked at, I did a case study. It was much easier. I knew how to do it. It's kind of a skill that just follows. And I think it's a better professional experience. You're better prepared for professional experiences as a result, regardless. So it's a useful thing to learn how to do. Yeah.
Gotcha. And Eric, I think that these are all great points. Eric, I'm interested in hearing about how you prepared for your case interviews.
Yeah. So I actually, this is funny because I had my wife give me cases all the time, which she was not thrilled about when it was happening, but it was extremely helpful. So I was able to. A lot of MBA programs will have case books that they give to the people that are interested in consulting. And so if you're able to get your hands on one of those, it's really useful because it comes stacked with like 50 different cases and they usually tell you the skill level for the case so you can work your way up in difficulty. The only caveat to that is that some of the MBA cases can get pretty difficult to the point where they're not as useful, but it's still a good resource. So I started pretty strong, doing like 10 cases a week. And then as I got closer to the interview, I started tapering down. And then the week of the interview, I didn't do too many cases at all, just a couple of warm-up ones the day of the interview. I think it's important to not overcase because then you start really getting in your head about the little details and really trying to like fine-tune everything to the point you're going to mess yourself up. But it is important to make sure you get enough reps, live reps with another interviewer to get the feel of what that experience is like.
Yeah, and really, just 2 points to jump in here. So things are universal. I mean, at the MBA and undergrad side, where vets groups are pretty tight, and in my case, I tend to take case largely with vets just because we had a lot higher. I saw a higher work ethic. Like veterans would do. I think we did on average about 50 cases. I know I did 50 cases. Or you saw some of the non-vets didn't kind of have that brute force mentality that we did. But yeah, like casing with your peers is great. And then also when you I'm not sure if you had this experience where the veterans clubs, or not veterans clubs, vets at McKinsey would do case prep for veterans, and those are like the gold standard of cases where you actually get someone at the firm, a veteran, who is giving you a case and feedback. I think I probably got like 2 or 3 of those, but that was, one of those was worth probably like 5 or 6, if not more, cases with a classmate. So that's kind of how it works, as far as casing with your peers, because we talk about these case books, like there will be the question, but then there will also be the answer or suggested answers. There's, you know, with cases, there's never a perfect answer. You know, there's some degree of I guess, you know, a gray area of what's, you know, what's perfect, what's not. But you know, there's broadly speaking some good points that they like to hear. And then in my case, I was a case interviewer, so I got to sit at the other side of the table. And what I will say is where you can really stand out is thinking through a case. I know it's easier said than done, but not just trying to go to like the default. You'll get these frameworks that you're supposed to apply, like a profit and loss framework, you know, an acquisition framework. But if you actually take time, take a deep breath, and then think through the case, and don't necessarily default to a framework, but write your actual thoughts about it and how you would approach the problem, that will really make you stand out for your interviewer, because 90% of the people are just going to go to a standard framework. And then once as an interviewer, you've heard like 10 of that same framework, your eyes start to glaze over when you get that one person who's actually applying critical thinking to that case. You tend to perk up a little bit, and you'll get a higher score from that interviewer. At least you got it, or at least in my case.
But Alec, can I jump in there real quick too? Because I want to highlight something that both you and Eric said. And I know Eric caveated this, but I want to make sure everyone is tracking right. There's a lot of great resources online, a lot of great videos, articles, right? But some are better than others. And it's hard to tell when you're kind of learning. People try and sell things. Don't buy things online. Right? There's a lot of great resources online, but also I want to emphasize there's a lot of really crazy hard cases online that I would struggle to solve right now with like a pen and calculator. I think most people would struggle. So like, and I think some cases online tend to go to the extreme on like difficulty. So those are good to practice and challenge yourself. I found my case interview experience probably easier than a lot of online cases I did. The stakes were higher and I had to be clearer, that kind of thing. But if you find something crazy that's like, I just cannot imagine solving that, it's probably not realistic. And just keep that in mind, because you know, looking back on my experience, I can tell. You know, Alec, I've been on the other side. I interview now. I've been on the other side of the table, and I can have that sense like, okay, some things are crazy online. And what Alex said is exactly right. I like to try and give cases that are less traditional. Of like, I've done a case about like a zoo before, not about profit or revenue or something, but just right.
Was this the sorry? Is this the panda case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I like to try and do untraditional things that you can't have a framework for that. So the better you can challenge yourself in the practice, with crazy cases, the better prepared you are for some surprise thing when you actually interview. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. And just follow, you know, going back, like go to people who have gone before you. So in my case, when I went and I'm like, I went to business school thinking that I wanted to work for McKinsey. So I was a little different than Eric and Kevin. The reason being, like, we veterans are competitive people, and McKinsey is kind of like the gold standard. I saw that they hired like 1% of applicants or something like that, and that made me instantly want to work there. So I started asking other veterans who had gotten McKinsey offers how they did it. That was kind of like the first stop, and that's what I felt helped me be successful in the recruiting process. You know, and it's universal, graduate and undergraduate. So always go to the people who've succeeded before you to get their advice. But before we turn over to questions, I do want to ask you guys, you know, kind of where you see your career right now, right? Because consulting, it's typically, you know, people will do about 2 years, and then you're at a pivot point where you can stick with it, or you can find something else you like to do. You get that universal skill set, that McKinsey stamp on your resume, where you can really do a lot of things. So Eric, will start out first. So you're pretty new in the game, but just want to get a thought as to where you see your career going.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that I think most people spend a lot of time thinking about at McKinsey. Currently, I'm really enjoying the work, and I see myself staying for quite a while longer. The biggest thing I'm considering right now is if I want to go back to school and get a graduate degree, or if I want to continue and try to get promoted to engagement manager. So that's what I see for the next couple of years as a big decision point. Both have pros and cons, but we'll see.
And then one thing, just caveat there is McKinsey will pay for your MBA. So free MBA.
It's hard to turn down a free MBA.
Yeah. Cool. Kevin, you've been at it a little longer. Where are you seeing your career going?
Yeah, so I think if you asked me a year ago, I was kind of more interested in some outside opportunities. I learned a lot, but I was excited to do something different because we just realized like how much interesting opportunities are out there. But recently, I kind of we say like you find your people, right? Because consulting is a people-based business, right? Different people do different type of work. I got into a type of work that I really enjoy. There's a group of people, partners, APs, right, teammates that I really enjoy working with, and I realized there's like a lot of exciting things that I could continue doing. And when I found them, then I started thinking like, I'm excited to stay. So I've been here about 2.5 years. I'm looking to transition to EM in the next year and a half. BAs have about 4-ish years to have that transition happen. And now that I found a great team, supportive leadership and opportunities to continue developing, I'm excited to stay and continue growing there. That being said, there's exciting opportunities at McKinsey specifically and similar opportunities in other consulting firms for what we say is like third year, fourth year analysts. I am applying for an exchange program. So we exchange with different offices around the world. I'm applying for Kenya. So I'm excited to do that hopefully next year. So you spend 6 months in the Nairobi office doing the same job at a higher level. You probably, right, but in a new geography. There's other opportunities like grad schools. That's something I'm keeping in the right for the future. And and just growing inside the current role and position. So you can't go wrong with like any decision at McKinsey, leaving or staying in many ways. It's more of a pivotal decision of like, if you want to stay on a path to partner after manager, I think it's a bigger kind of decision point for a lot of people. But right now I'm very excited about my growth and development in my current position. And so we'll be sticking around for a little bit. Yeah. At least.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the exchange program is something we didn't touch on. I was looking at that as well, but I was a consultant during COVID time, so there was like a lot of restrictions. But it's definitely one of the cool things about McKinsey is it's a global consulting firm, so there are offices around the world. And I believe with the exchange program, as long as you are fluent in the language of that office, it's pretty straightforward. So in my case, my wife is Irish, and I was looking at the Dublin office, and it was pretty straightforward. There was just a lot of admin hoops we had to jump through because of like COVID, and that was one of the reasons why I got turned off. But you speak English, and so it's like almost so many offices around the world are English primarily, so it makes life pretty easy. So you can go to even like Amsterdam, for example, is one. So that's a European office where you can get by with English. So lots of great opportunities around the world to travel and learn about global business. So with that, I will turn over to the attendees to see if y'all have any questions. Would appreciate it if there's a particular person you'd like to ask the question to, if you highlight them, or if you just put it out to the group, that's also fine. So the floor is yours. All right, so I see one from Caleb for the group. It says, what pointers can you guys offer from the application phase as far as getting to the point of receiving an interview? Any technical visualization certifications that might be useful, Power BI or Excel modeling, and how do referrals work at McKinsey, and what to look for with sophomore year summer internships to be more competitive for junior recruiting? Thanks. So we'll kick it off. I'll tell you what. So Kevin, you were just talking, so we'll pass it over to Eric.
Yeah. I know necessarily technical or visualization certifications come to mind as being overly useful. It's kind of the classic consulting answer. It all depends on what the rest of your resume looks like. If you feel like there's an area that you don't have much experience and you can bolster over the certification, it'll definitely help when you go through the interviews or the resume screen. But don't feel the need to spend all your time going out and getting certifications either. For referrals, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. I think people that work at McKinsey, there's a spot for us to go in and be able to refer people. I don't know where they go from there. To be completely honest, I just know there's a spot that we can enter it, and then it goes off to whoever it goes off to from there. I don't know how helpful that is, but and then what to look for is sophomore year summer internships to be more competitive. I think that one also varies. You should definitely do something that is going to round out your skill set to make. And the good thing about consulting is that the skill set is a very wide range of skills that they look for, because they want to be able to bring people to the team that can help out in different ways. So I would say for a sophomore year internship, like the best thing you can do is just do something that's interesting and challenging. If it's in consulting, great. If not, it doesn't hurt you. So just do something that you're interested in that's going to develop you in some way that can help you out.
Cool. And I'll turn it over to Kevin to see if you got anything to add to that.
Yeah. So with referrals, it's not a useful,
Yeah.
or I think useful or highly impactful thing for campus recruiting. It's usually used more for kind of expert type referrals. So I wouldn't chase that down. And I'd be wary of thinking like it's a tough thing, right? Because there's no singular application type that gets you in the door, and things are random. So I applied to BCG, Bain, McKinsey. I encourage everyone to apply to all kinds of firms, right? Don't be selective in your application. There's a lot of great opportunity out there. And I wasn't actually invited for final round interview, or sorry, full-time offer interviews at BCG and Bain in my junior year, even though I interviewed with them the 2 years prior. So there's some randomness with the selection. There's some, right? So it's hard to say what is like the perfect resume. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But what I do say is this, right? Think of things as gates. The first gate you have to pass is the resume selection. And whether you're a junior, sophomore, whatever, you put your best foot forward no matter what. So you go to your career counselor and have them review your resume. You have a friend who doesn't know the military review your resume so they can see if you can translate your military achievement to something that's understandable to someone who's not familiar. You go to a family member, right? You put all your time and energy into that resume first. You get invited to the interview, then you put all your time and energy into preparing for an interview, right? The case study. Besides that, right, there's no other outside factor that comes in. As an interviewer, I read your resume, but I have no play in why your resume was chosen. And we interview you based on a very strict set of standards. So once you pass those gates, it's kind of in the past, right? Then you just focus on the next one. And I think it's probably a similar process for most. So, if you have visual, like Power BI, for example, if you come to me and I'm interviewing you, which wouldn't happen, but let's say I'm interviewing you, I have no influence on whether that certification matters, right? All I'm going to do is test you on the case, and that's it. Will the recruiters see that as a plus? I think if you have it, sure, right? Will it move the needle? I don't know. What's more important is you're chasing the opportunity you have, right? So I interned at 2 nonprofit, nonprofit groups in my sophomore year. Didn't get paid for it. It was fun, but it was pretty easy. My next year, I did a small consulting communications firm. No one's ever heard of it, but I learned a ton. And I just kept building on that momentum of, hey, I learned this skill, let me apply it to something else next year. Eventually, I got the full-time offer, right? I think that's the right attitude to have. It's just always chase the opportunity you have. Put your best foot forward at each of the steps. If that certification is something that's reasonable for you to do it. But don't stress over the details, I think. Yeah.
The biggest things I think you can control on your resume are going to be your grade point average. Your previous employer, you already have a big check in the box with coming from the military there. And then also the format and the lack of errors in the resume. So don't have typos all throughout. Spend a lot of time going over it. Make sure that you're telling the story in the right way of what you've accomplished throughout your time in the military and any other jobs you may have held. I think that that's the best way to focus your time and energy on your resume.
Yeah, I'll jump in here with a couple things because I did some resume screening during my time at the firm. And for the resume, if you can highlight any adversity you have overcome, that is a big thing people like to see. So for example, if you're a first generation college student, that is something you should definitely highlight. If you come from an economically disadvantaged background, definitely highlight that, because there are so many, like we see so many resumes that are cookie cutter. Anything you can do to stand out and make yourself look different and will catch a recruiter's attention. I think that is something you really need to focus on. So then another thing to touch on with referrals is I've done a lot of referrals for people, because someone will like hit me up on LinkedIn. I've never met them before. They'll say, "Hey, I'm a vet. You're a vet. Interested in working at McKinsey. I was I was in the Navy. I did X, Y, and Z." I'm like, "Sure, yeah, I'll give you a referral." But when you fill out, there's a referral form. It's like, how well do you know this person? And I'm not going to lie. I'm going to say, okay, I've met this person. Like in passing, what do you know about the resume? I'm like, well, they were an F-18 pilot, so in my view, it's pretty strong. But there's no real personal touch there. That might help out. It might not. But where it does help is if it is someone who knows you well and who has a high opinion of you, can advocate for you. So they can put you in as a referral. And this happened to me twice, and both of the people I referred got offers. They got interviews and offers. And but I would then, because I know them well, I would write to the recruiter themselves and say, "Hey, I've known this person for X number of years. They have a distinguished background, in the military, in the private sector, et cetera. I personally would vouch for them and think that you should definitely give them a chance." And then oftentimes the recruiter will come back with some questions. So like, for example, I'll give you a quick example, and then I want to speed through things. But this guy was he was a SWCC. So for those of you in the military or in the Navy, that's Special Warfare Combatant Crewmen. They work kind of alongside SEALs, and they were like, what is that? So it says Special Warfare, but he's not a SEAL. And so I just gave some qualifying information about that, but it really became a dialogue, and then they were impressed and brought that person on. So what that is specifically, don't just go and have some rando write your referral. That's not really going to help your case at all. But if you do know someone at the firm and know them well, work with them and have them advocate for you. So with that, let's see here. I see Cody has asks, consulting and tech roles such as data science, software development, and program/project management are very good careers post undergrad. Anything that help you decide to commit to consulting? Additionally, any plans for future career pivots in a specific industry? If so, did working with different industries and consulting help you gravitate towards a certain industry? And I'll tell you what, we'll go Kevin first.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I mean, look, there's a lot of rewarding ways, right, to seek to have professional success and personal success. I was interested in, right, I studied economics. I like ideas. I like discussing things. I like learning and researching. So consulting fit what I was interested in. I didn't study computer science. I can't write code. So there's no tech opportunity for me there, right? Now there's maybe business development opportunities. So it's what you're interested in. If, right, there's pluses and minuses. There's a lot of flexibility of tech development, software development. You get paid a lot. You can work in your pajamas. But it's a different professional experience. I think I've seen some people who have tech experience, and they came to McKinsey for 2 years and went off to do great things at other places. So really, consulting is a more generalist position. It's more open to just about anybody. If you have a specialized skill, or you want to start the next Tesla, I usually recommend people, like, if you have that idea, go ahead and do it, right? McKinsey's, we're going to be here for a while. So it's one great path of many, and it's personal choice.
Cool. All right. And so just in the interest of time, we've got about 10 minutes. I'm looking at a few of these here, and I want to consolidate them with some of the quicker ones. So what I will ask, first one, I'm seeing one about GPAs. How do have you seen anything about undergrad GPA and a cutoff?
I haven't seen anything about a strict cutoff. I mean, it definitely helps to have a higher GPA going into the process. But as far as a cutoff, I'll keep it short. I haven't seen anything about a cutoff.
I haven't seen anything specific either. I'd say if you're working hard and right, you're an engineer and you have a 3.4 or something, don't count yourself out. It's a tough, we know schools are tough. We know engineering degrees are tough. If you're studying music or something, you probably should have a little bit higher. I have no idea. I'm making judgments, right? But just don't count yourself out because the recruiters are smart. They know how to interpret your course workload and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't count yourself out. But again, the stronger GPA, the better. And then there was some probably a little bit of leeway if you've got a harder major. And one thing I'll also add is if you can take a standardized test, good thing about standardized tests is that they're standardized. So that's an objective measure that they can have against all applicants. So if you have a good SAT or something like that, definitely highlight that. Let's see here. I'm going to take a look at a question about MBAs. Like, have any of you thought about, or would you have advice for an older service member to go undergrad to MBA and then go to consulting? Or have you seen that path?
Um, I haven't seen. I don't know if I've seen undergrad to MBA to consulting. The pro of getting an MBA is that you're going to enter McKinsey at a higher pay level, but the job is basically the same as somebody who comes from undergrad. As far as promoting or anything, MBA isn't really a factor that's taken into account. It's mostly just based on your work at the firm. But you do start off at a higher level if you come in with an MBA. So personal decision of the 2 years is worth it, but yeah.
And I'll add to the way I think about it is this, right? If I were graduating again, if you can get a job at a place like McKinsey, I'm wearing my McKinsey hat, but there's a lot of other great opportunities out there. You should take it, in my opinion, right? The MBA is always going to be there. You get kind of a MBA education on the job at a place like McKinsey too. So I think of it as like, okay, let me try and get this professional experience that I can. If I don't, the MBA is a great opportunity to like quote unquote try again, right? You get more business training, you do other internships. It's typically a different recruiting market for MBA students compared to undergrad. So then put it off. Like a good friend of mine, who's done Alex DeVivo, Matt DeVivo.
Oh, yeah,
What's his name?
Matt DeVivo.
Matt DeVivo. It's been like a year. He went to Columbia, went to Bank of America, did his like MBA at Wharton, I think online or executive MBA or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, he did
the program. And
yeah,
then
he did the MBA.
And then he came to McKinsey as an associate, right? So it took a little bit longer, but the whole time he's just progressing. And I say, I think at any time in your career, McKinsey is probably a great stop to have. So if it doesn't happen now, most people come to McKinsey a little bit later. I think it's a misconception that a lot of people are 22-year-old BAs. Most people have lots of professional experience from elsewhere. It seems like the normal pathway, but in actuality, it's not. So take your time and take the path that works for you.
Yeah, an undergrad to MBA is a thing. I've known a bunch of people who have done it. There are pros and there are cons. As discussed, it's an extra 2 years, but you do kind of get out at that higher point, because when you think about it, where you do your military service is kind of irrelevant because it's job experience. Like you got 4 years of job experience before you did undergrad in the military or after undergrad. It doesn't really make a huge difference because it's the same experience. So it's just kind of again, it's a judgment call. Do you want to give up 2 years? Do you have GI Bill benefits, or can you make it financially work for yourself? But it is the big thing about an MBA is it is a magic Nintendo reset button, and the recruiting process for consulting is fairly straightforward, where you come in your first year, your first semester is when you're going to be doing all your your interviews, and you're going to have the same opportunities as you would as an undergrad. So if you feel like you missed out on them as an undergrad, an MBA is an opportunity. You just got to decide whether or not that 2 years is worth it. Well, we're going to do one last one because this is a popular one. Is what doors does an MBA or what doors does an MBA open for employees at McKinsey, such as increased pay, higher clients, et cetera. And I think we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's important that people understand what the difference is between an associate and a business analyst.
There's not too much of a difference in terms of the day-to-day work that you're going to be doing. Associates are normally a little bit older with more work experience, so they are trusted sometimes with larger work streams, or you might be solving a more difficult or analytical piece. But when you get to a tenured BA versus a tenured associate, that the work is pretty similar for the most part, at least in my experience. Kevin, I don't know if you've seen it different.
Yeah. You're right. So a business analyst and associate on a team, let's say a 2-year business analyst or a senior business analyst and associate on a team is typically doing the same thing. Associates have more work experience, so they ramp up a little bit faster. The expectations are a little bit higher. That's probably more of the difference. You're expected to make EM or manager in like 3 years. BAs have 4 years. We have a little bit more opportunity for grad school, that kind of thing. So it is a little bit different internally, but there's 2 associates on my team. We'd be probably indistinguishable in terms of the work we're doing. So that's why I say, like, if you have this opportunity to come to a place like this without the MBA, I think it's the right way to go. And I would say today, and Alec, I'll take a moment. We talked a lot about the professional development, right? What it takes to come in. I think if we could highlight some of the fun stuff and the exciting stuff that we do, I think that would be fun. Right?
Yeah, please do.
So, because like we do a lot of interesting things. So obviously we travel. I think the past couple weeks, it's been a little bit of a crazy couple weeks, but I was in North Carolina, Florida. I'm in Norfolk, Virginia now. I'm going back to DC. I live in Miami, right? You're kind of moving around a lot. You see a lot of the country. Some people go overseas. I've worked in Chicago, California, San Diego, right? So it's a fun opportunity to see different places. You work with amazing people, just very talented, very skilled, worldly people who travel, who take, go on a weekend to fun, they take trips to like Central America. I've heard people doing long weekends and stuff like that. I went to Guatemala a couple weeks ago for, so like fun, people, stories, you do activities. So Miami office, I forgot to mention I'm at the Miami office, but we do a lot of fun things. We went to a Miami Heat game last weekend as an office. Art Basel. We had a business analyst boat trip one weekend. Right, you're always doing fun activities with your team, and I'll say like the clients too. And I want to highlight that I'm working with a military client. I keep it vague, right? But I was in a room today with 30, 40, 50 people. We're leading client workshop. We had officers from 04 to probably a retired lieutenant general type rank there, right? We had E9s, E8s, sergeant major type ranks. You're working with very high level people, and that's something you won't find in most companies or other opportunities. That's what makes McKinsey and similar firms unique, and that's what I really encourage to keep in the back of mind. We work hard. It's a lot of prep. We work a lot, but it's a very unique and amazing opportunity, and you learn a lot as a result of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Eric, what's your favorite fun moment from McKinsey? We'll close it out with that.
I mean, right now, what Kevin was talking about, the study or the project that I'm currently working on, like we've got to travel to Mexico, we've got to go to Austria. There's talk we might be going to Asia early next year. We're going to be going to Milan. So like getting to see the world and not having to pay for your plane ticket there is a really cool perk. And then also just, what he was talking about, we had our office Christmas party last weekend, which was really fun to see everybody. All the interns last summer went up and went on a lake trip and went boating for the day. Just fun stuff, and the people you work with are great, and yeah, a lot of really fun perks to it.
Yeah, you get spoiled.
That's crazy.
The number of nice dinners I've had at Ritz-Carlton hotels. Yeah, I think I finally ran out of my last Ritz-Carlton pen, and I left the firm almost 2 years ago. So yeah, you do get spoiled. They work you very hard, but there are definitely perks associated with it. So with that, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate you sharing this. For the group, don't be shy to hit us up on LinkedIn if you have any further questions. And with that, I'll let you all have a great evening. Thank you all for your time.